The letter rain tapped gently on the glass of Sundar's corner office window. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon in Silicon Valley, and the CEO of one of the world's biggest tech companies was reviewing plans for a new product launch. Everything around him screamed success awards on the walls, a skyline view, and a calendar booked 6 months out. Yet, he often felt a strange emptiness, a silence that all the noise of technology couldn't fill. Then the assistant knocked softly and entered with a puzzled look. "Someone left this envelope at the front desk," she said. "No return address." "Just your name on it." Sundar took the envelope. It was plain and a bit wrinkled. No logo, no handwriting he recognized. He opened it casually, expecting another startup pitch or a thank you card from a college student. But inside there was only a short note. "You have a son? His name is Arjun. He's 24, and he deserves to know you." The room tilted for a moment. "Read the note again, and again." His hands started to tremble, a rare thing for a man who had stood in front of thousands. His assistant looked concerned, but he waved her out. After she left, Sundar leaned back in his chair, eyes unfocused. The name Arjun echoed in his mind like a forgotten melody. His thoughts drifted back to a dusty town in India over 2 decades ago, to a time before Silicon Valley, before boardrooms, before interviews and cameras. Back then, he was just Sundar Quiet, curious and deeply in love with a girl named Mira. They had shared everything: walks after school, dreams whispered under starlight, and promises made too young to keep. But when Sundar got the scholarship to study in the United States, everything changed. He had begged her to come with him. She had cried, but said no. She had responsibilities. Her father was sick. Her mother worked 2 jobs. And back then, girls didn't just leave. They had one last night under the banyan tree behind the school. He had held her and said he'd write. She had nodded and smiled through tears. But time passed. Letters stopped. The distance grew. And eventually they became 2 stories with no bridge between them until now. Sundar folded the note and put it in his drawer. He couldn't think. He couldn't work. So he left the office early for the first time in years. That evening, he sat in his study looking at a photo of his family, his wife, and 2 children. His daughter had his eyes. His son had his love for computers. Life had been good. But what? If there was more, he picked up his phone, hand shaking again. He typed in Mira Singh and hit search. Hundreds of results came up, but none that looked familiar. He scrolled for hours, chasing shadows. Finally, just past midnight, he found a newspaper clipping from a small Indian town. Local teacher wins district award. Mira Singh honored for her work with underprivileged children. Her photo was grainy, but it was her. Same eyes. Same. Quiet strength. The article was from 6 months ago. It listed a school name. Sundar stared at it. 25 years had passed, and now, with one line on a paper, his world was turning upside down. The next morning, he canceled all meetings. He told his team he was taking personal time. No one questioned him. He booked a flight to India under a different name. He didn't want cameras. Not yet. The plane ride was long, but his mind raced faster. What would he say? What if she hated him? What if Arjun didn't want to meet him? Or worse, what if this was a mistake? As he landed in Chennai and took a car to the town where Mira lived, memories flooded him like old photographs. Her laugh, her handwriting, the way she used to fix his collar before exams. The town hadn't changed much. The same narrow roads, the smell of spices and dust, the hum of scooters and temple bells. He stood outside the school gate, watching children play. And then, from the far end, he saw her .meer older, of course. A few silver threads in her hair. But still her. Still so familiar it hurt. She was speaking to a student. Then she looked up. Their eyes met, and she froze. He took a step forward, but before he could speak, a young man came running out of the school. "Ma," the boy said, "someone's waiting for you at the clinic." She nodded, touched the boy's arm, and turned to leave. But Sundar heard it. The boy had said, "Ma." And Mira had touched him with the same gentleness she once gave Sundar. The boy turned too. He looked at Sundar with curious eyes, tall, slim, sharp jaw, and something about the way he looked reminded Sundar of someone he saw every day in the mirror. His heart thudded in his chest. That could this be Arjun? Before Sundar could speak, the boy walked away. Sundar stood there, unsure of everything, until another voice came from behind. I thought you'd never come back. It was Mii Aridat. She was standing there. No smile, no anger, just truth. Sundar swallowed hard. Is he my son? He asked. She nodded. Why now? She asked Dot. He held up the note. I didn't send it, she said quietly. The air thickened. Dot, if she didn't send it, then who did? And what did they want? Asterisk the truth behind the silence. Sun was beginning to set, casting a soft orange hue over the dusty streets of the town Sundar once called home. The quiet sound of children playing in the distance, the scent of jasmine in the breeze, and the echo of a temple bell made the moment feel like a memory rather than real life. And yet, here he was standing face to face with the woman he once loved deeply. Her presence was both comforting and terrifying, like opening a door long closed, only to realize the room inside was still filled with the same air, the same scent, the same heartbreak. Amy stood still for a moment longer, letting the silence stretch between them. Sundar noticed how she held her hands together, not out of nervousness but control. She was always that way, measured, composed. In high school, he had admired how she never raised her voice, even when teachers scolded her unfairly or when classmates whispered about her family struggles. She had always been a quiet storm, gentle, but unstoppable. You didn't send the note? Sundar asked again, this time slower, more carefully, as though repeating it might make the truth clearer. Mii shook her head. Her voice was even, but the edges of her eyes betrayed her restraint. No, I would never do that. I didn't think you'd even remember me. I never forgot, Sundar replied softly. They stood in silence for a moment longer, neither quite knowing how to step into the past without breaking the present. Mii finally gestured toward a narrow lane beside the school. Let's walk. Too many years here? They walked slowly, and Sundar took in everything. The children's chalk drawings on the pavement, the way Mira greeted neighbors with soft nods, how some women stared curiously at him but said nothing. He realized then that her world was very different from his, and yet in some strange way, more real than anything he had built. As they reached a quiet park behind the school lawn, overgrown with bougainvillea and shaded by neem trees, Mira sat down on a weathered bench. Sundar followed, but not too close. He didn't want to invade her space. His name is Arjun, she said after a moment. He's smart, kind, stubborn, like my father, but he's yours, Sundar, in more ways than I can explain. Sundar's chest tightened. The idea of having a son, an adult son, with a full life and thoughts and memories was something his mind hadn't yet caught up with. He had children, yes, but he had watched them grow. He had held their hands on their first day of school, taught them to ride bikes, sat through piano recitals. But Arjun had lived a whole life without him, and that truth cut deeper than he expected. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, not with accusation, but with real pain. Mira turned, her face away, looking up at the swaying branches above. I was going to, she said quietly. I wrote letters, many, but I never sent them. Why? She looked at him then, her eyes shining not with tears, but with something heavier, regret, maybe, or exhaustion. Because you were building your life. You were already in a different world. You sent letters for the first year, I replied, but then they stopped. No warning, no goodbye, just silence. I thought you had moved on, maybe even fallen in love. I wasn't going to burden you with a child you didn't ask for. Sundar stared at her, confused, but I never stopped writing. I thought you were the one who stopped. Mira frowned. I never got anything after the first year. And just like that, a possibility dawned on them both. A tragic, ordinary possibility. Do you think our letters were taken? By someone? He asked. Our single quote face changed. Her mouth opened slightly. My uncle. He lived with us. Very strict. He didn't like that I was seeing someone. Especially someone leaving for America. I found one of your letters once. Hidden behind the kitchen cupboard. He must have taken them. Sundar leaned back, closing his eyes. All those years, two people aching on opposite ends of the world, both thinking they had been left. The realization stung more than betrayal ever could. This wasn't anyone's fault. It was worse, it was no one's. Mira continued, her voice distant. By the time Arjun was born, you were already in grad school. I thought of calling. I even got your number once from an old friend, but I couldn't bring myself to dial. And later you were everywhere. Interviews, news, your speeches. You became someone important. I didn't want to interrupt your life. Sundar looked at her, then truly looked. She had carried all this alone, raised a child, built a life, and watched him become a global figure from afar, never asking for anything. That kind of strength was rare. It humbled him. I would have come, he said. If I'd known, I would have come. Mira smiled. Faintly, but it was tinged with sadness. Maybe or maybe not. We were young. We didn't know how to hold on. They sat in silence again, listening to the sound of the wind. Arjun doesn't know? Sundar finally asked. No, she said. He knows his father left. I told him you moved away. I never said your name. Never wanted him to feel abandoned. But I also couldn't lie. He deserves to know. He does, Mira agreed. But not from me, not anymore. He's grown now. He's looking for answers. And I think maybe that's why you're here? Sundar nodded slowly. Maybe he sent the letter? No, Mira said. He doesn't know your name. He never asked. Then who? Sundar asked. They were both quiet for a moment. Then Mira's eyes narrowed slightly, as if something had just clicked in her mind. His friend, Kavya. She's always been close to him. She's a journalist now. Curious. Clever. She used to ask about his father more than he did. Sundar leaned forward. You think she found out? Possibly. If she traced anything, maybe even from old school records, she could have figured it out. And if she thought Arjun deserved the truth, she might have sent the letter herself. They looked at each other. The thought brought both relief and anxiety. Then Mira said something that made Sundar's chest tighten again. He has your eyes, but he doesn't know what it means to have a father. The words hit hard. Sundar thought about all the moments he had missed: birthdays, scraped knees, teenage tantrums, college choices. He wasn't there for any of it. And yet, this wasn't a stranger. This was his son. A young man walking around the world without knowing half of where he came from. I want to meet him, Sundar said. Mira hesitated. You're sure? More than anything. Then come to dinner, she said. I'll tell him you're an old friend from college visiting India. You won't ask too many questions. But watch him. Listen. See if you're ready to be in his life. Not just as a name, but as a father. Sundar nodded. That evening, as the sky turned from gold to deep blue, Sundar sat at a modest dinner table in a small house filled with warmth. The walls were lined with photographs. Arjun at age 10 holding a science fair ribbon. Arjun in a football jersey. Arjun with Mira on a beach trip. Then the door opened. And in walked a tall young man with sharp features, tired eyes, and the casual confidence of someone who had grown up figuring things out on his own. You must be Sundar, he said politely, shaking his hand. Yes, Sundar replied, forcing a smile. Old friend of your mom's. Arjun smiled back, but something in his eyes held a quiet suspicion, as if part of him already knew this wasn't a regular visit. They sat and ate, talked about simple things. But Sundar couldn't stop watching him, his mannerisms, his laugh. The way he looked at Mira like she was his whole world. At one point, Arjun asked, So, where do you live now? California, Sundar said. Tech? Sundar hesitated. Yes, cool, Arjun replied. That's where I'm applying for a master's, computer science. The words hung in the air. You're into computers? Sundar asked. Always have been, Arjun said. Mom says I get it from nowhere, but I've always loved building things. Mira looked down at her plate. Sundar caught it. Bit quiet. Ache of a mother holding a secret too long. After dinner, as Arjun stepped out to take a call, Sundar looked at Mira. I want to tell him. Then do it soon, she said. Because he's leaving in 2 weeks? Where? California, she whispered. To internet your company. Sundar froze. Everything he thought he was controlling his time, his decisions. Even fate itself was already unfolding in secret, and it was about to come crashing into the light. Asterisk, the airport windows, night air in the town was quiet. But Sundar's mind was anything but. As he sat on the edge of the guest cot in Mira's home, too small for a man used to king-sized mattresses and luxury bedding, he stared at the ceiling fan spinning above, slow and rhythmic. The sound was familiar. It reminded him of childhood, of humid summers in India, of restless nights thinking about the future. But tonight, the fan spun over a man who was now living inside the very questions he used to dream of avoiding questions. About responsibility, identity, and the truth. He hadn't expected Arjun to be so ... composed. The boy no. The man had a calm energy, like Mira, but with something else underneath. A quiet sharpness, a sense of observation. Sundar realized he was likely being studied, just as he had been studying Arjun. Their dinner conversation kept replaying in his mind, especially that last line. I have always loved building things. That could have been Sundar's line 25 years ago. The words felt like an echo, stretching across generations. And now Arjun was coming to California. Not just to any company, but to Sundar's. The gravity of it was still sinking in. Turned his head slightly. Through the open window, he could hear Mira's voice faintly as she spoke on the phone in the next room, checking in on school reports, comforting a fellow teacher whose father had fallen ill. Her voice had not changed much. Still calm. Still giving. But underneath it all, he sensed fatigue. A lifetime of carrying too much. How had she done it? Raised a child alone, built a career, and kept herself together without ever asking for anything? Sundar felt the edges of guilt creeping in again. Not the kind that screamed, but the kind that lingered. The kind that whispered, you weren't. There. The next morning came too fast. Sunlight filtered through old curtains, painting dim gold lines across the floor. Sundar rose early, bathed with a steel bucket and cold water, something he hadn't done in decades, and dressed in plain clothes. He felt strangely more like himself in those moments than he had in years. Over breakfast, Mira was quiet. She poured chai, handed him a plate of poha, and finally said, Arjun's flight is tonight. He leaves from Chennai. I'm going with him, just to see him off. Sundar nodded, unsure what to say. Then she looked up. You should come. He blinked. To the airport? Yes, she said, her voice firm. I think it's time. He didn't ask if Arjun would be okay with it. He didn't ask if it would be awkward. Because deep down he knew she was right. The time for hiding had passed. What remained was the truth. And the truth had a way of showing up, whether one was ready or not. The car ride to Chennai was long. Arjun sat in the front, headphones in, occasionally glancing out the window. Sundar sat in the back, watching him, noting the way his fingers tapped the rhythm of a song only he could hear. Mira sat beside Arjun, stealing glances at Sundar through the rearview mirror. There was tension in the silence, but not the uncomfortable. It was a heavy kind. Like a storm cloud waiting to break. As they reached the airport and walked through the terminal, Sundar kept his distance. He didn't want to crowd June's last hours in India. Instead, he followed quietly, absorbing the small moments. A hug between Arjun and Mira. A laugh shared over a misplaced boarding pass. Arjun offering his charger to a stranger in the waiting area. Every gesture, every look, felt significant. Sundar wasn't just watching a young man preparing to leave. He was watching his someone made of his blood, but shaped by someone else's hands. Then came the moment. Arjun turned to Sundar and asked, "So, what do you do in California?" The question hung in the air, simple but sharp. Me, E-R-A, looked at Sundar, then looked away. Sundar took a slow breath. "I work in technology," he said. "Anywhere I know?" He hesitated, then decided to stop hiding. Double quotes Google. He said. Arjun raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" "Yes." Arjun whistled softly. That's big. Asterisk. Sundar nodded. "It's where your internship will be." Arjun blinked. "Wait, you work there?" "I run it," Sundar said quietly. Arjun stared at him, confused. "What do you mean? Like, you manage a team?" Sundar looked him in the eyes. "No, I'm the CEO." The silence after that was total. Even the noise of the terminal seemed to dull. Arjun looked between Sundar and Mira, his brows slowly pulling together. "Why didn't you say that yesterday?" He asked. "Because I wanted to know you," Sundar said, "before you knew me." Arjun crossed his arms, processing. "But you said you were just a friend of my mom's?" Mira stepped in, then her voice low. "Arjun, there's more you need to know." He looked at her, then at Sundar. Something in his eyes shifted. "Wait. No, this isn't..." He took a step back. "Is this... are you saying?" His voice cracked. Not out of anger, but something worse, fear, confusion, the kind of emotion that shakes the walls of what someone thinks is true. Sundar stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal. "I didn't know," he said. "Not until 3 days ago. I swear to you, I didn't. You're my father?" Arjun's voice was almost a whisper. Sundar nodded. "You left?" Arjun said. "I didn't mean to." "I thought..." Sundar paused, his throat dry. "I thought she had stopped writing. She thought I had. The truth got lost. And I didn't know you existed until now." Arjun looked at Mira, who said nothing. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. "Why would you keep this from me?" Arjun asked her. "I wanted to protect you," she said. "I didn't know how to explain everything." Arjun shook his head, eyes wide. He looked back at Sundar. "So you're the reason I've loved computers my whole life." Asterisk, maybe, Sundar said. "But you're the reason you're here. You made it." Arjun looked down, then sat suddenly on the bench beside the glass window overlooking the runway. He didn't speak. He just stared. After a long moment, he said, "I don't know what to feel right now." "You don't have to decide anything," Sundar said. "I just wanted you to know the truth. And I'll be wherever you need me to be, near or far." Arjun nodded slowly. His flight was called. He stood, picked up his bag, and walked toward the gate. But just before crossing the line, he turned back, asterisk, and said 4 words that Sundar would never forget. "Are you proud of me?" The question sliced through years of silence and uncertainty. Sundar didn't answer right away. He stepped forward, eyes wet, and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I've never been prouder of anyone in my life." Arjun looked at him, unsure, but he nodded. Then he turned and walked through the gate. Sundar stood at the glass wall, watching the plane taxi down the runway, his reflection faint against the darkened terminal glass. Beside him, Mira stood silently. "Do you think he'll come back?" Sundar asked. "I think," she said, "he's deciding whether you're worth returning to." Sundar nodded, a slow tear rolling down his cheek. "Then I'll wait," he said. Asterisk the silence between messages. 3 weeks passed. In California. The days rolled forward like silent dominoes. Each morning, Sundar sat in his office, surrounded by bright screens and sleek devices, but his mind was never fully present. The engineers pitched updates, the designers presented prototypes, and somewhere in the background, his own voice filled meeting rooms across the globe. But none of it felt real. Not entirely. Not since that day at the airport. He had waited at the terminal window until the plane was no longer visible, hoping foolishly that Arjun would turn back at the last moment. He didn't, and Sundar couldn't blame him. The young man had just learned that the most consistent truth in his life had been incomplete. He had walked onto that plane with the weight of a new identity strapped to his back, one that would either root him or break him. And now Sundar waited. The silence was cruel in its simplicity. No call, no email, no message. Arjun had arrived in California safely. Mira had confirmed that much with a short text. He's there, adjusting. Give him space. And Sundar had respected that. At least on the outside. But on the inside, the silence thundered. In the evenings, Sundar found himself scrolling through Arjun's online footprint, his college blog, old GitHub repositories, LinkedIn profile. He read a comment Arjun once left on a coding forum about building a chess engine from scratch. It made him smile. That's exactly what I did when I was 20, he thought. Still, there was something deeper in his search. Sundar wasn't just looking for information. He was looking for proof that he belonged to this boy's life in some way. That maybe DNA wasn't the only thing they shared. That maybe he hadn't lost everything. Then, one afternoon, his assistant entered his office and placed a familiar file on his desk. A new batch of interns had arrived, bright minds from all over the world, handpicked by his team. Sundar rarely reviewed the files himself, but this time curiosity overtook him. He opened the folder and flipped through. Page 3. Arjun Singh. He stopped breathing for a moment. The photo showed Arjun with a half smile, confident, unreadable. His resume was impressive projects in machine learning, data visualization tools, work with underserved schools. The boy had not only inherited intelligence, but empathy. Sundar read the file twice, then a third time. There, under preferred mentor, was a single name written by hand. S. Pichai. Sundar stared at the letters, unsure if they were a message or a test. He thought about calling Mira, but didn't. Instead, he sent a brief reply to the intern coordinator. Assign this candidate to me, directly. That evening, he sat alone in his backyard, a gentle breeze swaying the lanterns that hung above the deck. His family was out for the night, his wife attending a fundraiser, his daughter at a dance practice, his son on a school trip, and for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to fully feel the weight of everything. He thought of Mira again, and how different her life had been. She never had evenings like this, quiet, luxurious, unburdened. She had raised Arjun in the chaos of scarcity, and yet somehow raised him whole. The first day of the internship came. Quietly, Sundar walked into the conference room, prepared for a casual welcome, but his heart was anything but calm. When he entered, 10 interns stood, wide-eyed. A few whispered his name. A few instinctively reached for their phones. He waved it off gently and introduced himself, making a joke about how even the CEO was once an intern. Then his eyes found Arjun. Standing at the edge of the group, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. Sundar felt a tightening in his chest. Arjun, he said. Sir, Arjun replied, nodding politely. No warmth, but no anger either. Throughout the day, Sundar noticed the way Arjun observed everything. How he watched, not just what people said, but how they said it. He was reserved but present, intelligent but quiet. The others surrounded Sundar with questions, hungry for insight, but Arjun stood back, listening more than he spoke. Later that day, Sundar caught up to him in the hallway. Walk with me, he asked. Arjun nodded. They stepped outside into the campus gardens, where long benches curved beneath old oak trees. Students and staff passed by, laughing, sipping coffee, lost in their own lives. You wrote my name on the form, Sundar said. Yeah, Arjun replied. I figured if I was going to do this, I wanted to know what kind of person you are, up close. Sundar nodded slowly. That's fair. They walked in silence for a bit. Then Arjun asked, why didn't you try harder to find her? Sundar looked at the path ahead. I thought she moved on. I told myself it was for the best. I buried it. I focused on the future, but I never stopped thinking about her, about what we could have been. Arjun kicked a stone off the path. She cried the day I graduated, he said, not because I was leaving, but because she thought I'd feel the absence even more over there. She said, you'll feel the missing pieces louder when everything else gets quiet. I didn't understand it then. I think I do now. Sundar looked at him. I know I have no right to ask, but I want to be part of your life. Whatever that looks like. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to try. Arjun stopped walking. He looked up at the trees. Then back at Sundar. You know what I remember most about growing up without a father? He asked. Sundar shook his head. Not the birthdays. Not the school events. It was the little things. When my bike broke and I had to carry it home. When my friends talked about their dads teaching them to shave. When mom was sick and I didn't know who to call. It wasn't your absence that hurt the most. It was how permanent it felt. The words stung. Not like an attack, but like truth. Peeling away a layer. I can't fix that, Sundar said quietly. No, Arjun said. But maybe you can start now. And then, finally, the smallest crack appeared in Arjun's armor. He reached into his backpack and pulled out an envelope. I wrote this, he said, after I landed here. I didn't send it. Maybe I wasn't ready. Maybe I was afraid. Sundar took the envelope with trembling hands. Can I read it now? He asked. Arjun nodded. Sundar opened the letter. It was handwritten, simple, direct. I don't know who you are yet. I don't know if I want to forgive you. But I know this. I want to know you. Not the CEO, not the image. Just the person who helped make me. Sundar looked up, eyes glassy. Thank you. He whispered. Arjun gave a small shrug. Don't thank me yet. Can I show you something? Sundar asked. Arjun nodded. They walked back inside and entered Sundar's office. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn photograph. It was old, faded around the edges. Two teenagers beneath a banyan tree, smiling, unafraid of the future. That's us. Sundar said. Arjun took the photo, stared at it for a long time. You loved her, he said. With everything, Sundar replied. Arjun nodded. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, Did you ever think about having a son? Every day, Sundar said. I just didn't know he already existed. For the first time, Arjun smiled. It wasn't wide. It wasn't certain. But it was real. And for Sundar, it was everything. Asterisk when walls begin to fall. Days that followed were fragile. Like walking across glass carefully. Cautiously, knowing that one misstep could shatter everything, Sundar found himself slowing down in ways he never had before. His schedule remained full: meetings with executives, presentations to global partners, late-night calls across time zones. But his heart was no longer tethered to those rooms. He had spent years constructing a life of precision and order, a fortress built with logic, innovation, and relentless discipline. But now, for the first time, he was learning the delicate language of something more human. RECONNECT. TION. Arjun didn't warm quickly. Sundar never expected him to. They didn't jump into hugs or overnight familiarity. Instead, it began with the smallest things. A quiet walk to the coffee stand inside the campus. Shared glances during team discussions. Moments when Arjun asked, But it's not about life, but about code. Small, practical things. And Sundar gave his answers slowly, not just to teach, but to understand how Arjun thought, how his mind worked, how he approached problems. It was strange, watching his son sit across from him, typing away with quiet confidence, unaware that Sundar sometimes watched him more than the screen. He saw it all: how Arjun frowned when stuck, how he tapped his pen against his notebook while thinking, how he paused before speaking in meetings, as if measuring every word. Sundar recognized so much of himself in those habits, and yet Arjun remained completely his own person, shaped by Mira's gentleness, sharpened by independence. One Friday afternoon, after most of the interns had left for the weekend, Arjun stayed behind in the lab. Sundar passed by, paused at the door, then stepped inside. Working late? He asked. Debugging a weird memory leak? Arjun replied without looking up. Asterisk. Sundar chuckled softly. The eternal enemy. Arjun smirked, then closed his laptop. You free? Sundar blinked. For what? Coffee. Arjun said. But not here. 15 minutes later, they sat at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the office, far from cameras and curious eyes. Arjun stirred his drink slowly, then looked up. Can I ask something personal? Sundar nodded. Double quotes. What was it like? When you found out? Sundar leaned back, staring at the soft ripples and his own coffee. Honestly, it broke something in me. Not because I was angry or betrayed, but because I realized there was this whole world, a version of my life that had existed without me. And the worst part was, I could have been there. I could have known you, and I didn't. Arjun nodded. I kept thinking the same thing, like, you were there the whole time, just on the other side of the planet, and I never knew. I know, Sundar said, softly, and I'm sorry. Arjun didn't speak for a while. Then he asked, did you love my mom? More than anything, Sundar said. But we were young. And then we were separated by things we didn't understand. Pride, distance, maybe even fear. And by the time I realized how much I'd lost, life had already carried me too far in the other direction. Arjun's eyes softened. She never blamed you, not once. I don't deserve that, Sundar said. Maybe not, Arjun replied. But she gave it anyway. The next day, something shifted. Sundar invited Arjun to his home, not formally, not with ceremony, just a casual suggestion. Dinner, if you're free. My wife and kids would love to meet you. Arjun hesitated. Then nodded. Double quotes, okay? Sundar's wife, Anjali, greeted Arjun with warmth and a quiet understanding. She had known about Mira for years. Sundar had told her everything during the early days of their marriage. She never held it against him. Life before marriage was, to her, part of the story, not a betrayal. And now that truth was in front of her, flesh and blood, standing nervously in the foyer. You don't have to be anyone but yourself, Anjali said, guiding Arjun to the table. That's all we ask. His younger half-siblings were curious. Naturally. Not about his past, but his skills. They peppered him with questions about gaming, apps, whether he knew how to code AI bots. He answered patiently, sometimes even laughing. For Sundar, the evening was surreal. He sat at the head of the table watching two worlds, his old and new gently collide. Not with fireworks or tension, but with cautious curiosity. And that was enough. After dessert, Sundar found Arjun alone on the balcony, looking out over the garden. Thank you for coming, Sundar said. Arjun nodded. Your family is nice. Your son's a genius with Rubik's cubes. Sundar smiled. I think he just wants to impress you. A silence settled between them, but this one was different. Not awkward. Just full. Then Arjun said something that stunned him. I visited the tree. Sundar looked over. The banyan tree, Arjun continued. Back in town. The one in that photo. The one where you and Mom used to sit. You did? Yeah, Arjun said. The branches are thicker now, roots deeper. But it still feels timeless. Like some moments never really die. Sundar swallowed. What did it feel like? Like I could hear you, Arjun said. Not with words, just presence. They stood together for a while, listening to the sound of wind rustling through. The trees below. Then Arjun asked, why didn't you tell your family about me before? The question was honest, not accusatory. Sundar breathed in slowly. I wasn't sure I had the right to change their lives. Or yours. I thought keeping things separate was respectful. But maybe it was cowardice too. Arjun nodded. Thank you for telling them, for letting me in. You let me in, Sundar replied. A week later, they traveled back to India. Not for business, not for ceremony. Just the two of them. They surprised Mira at the school. She was helping paint a mural with the children, her sleeves rolled, her hands stained with bright colors. When she saw them, her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to quiet joy. Arjun walked up to her and hugged her, not the usual kind, a full one. Arms tight, unafraid. Mira looked at Sundar over his shoulder, eyes glistening. Later, as they sat on the school steps, Sundar shared a small packet he had brought with him. Inside were documents, legal ones, a trust fund, educational endowments, and something else. A name change request. If you want it, Sundar said, you can carry both names, or neither. It's your choice, but this is my way of showing that I'm not going anywhere again. Arjun stared at the paper for a long time. Then, slowly, he folded it and slipped it into his backpack. I'm not ready yet, he said. That's okay, Sundar replied. I'll wait. But even as he said it, Sundar felt something had already changed, not just in names or signatures. But in the space between father and son. Not everything had healed, not every scar was gone, but the wall between them. It was finally beginning to fall. Asterisk, the name on the badgeman's past. Summer slipped into autumn, and California skies burned gold as the leaves changed. Time didn't rush, but it didn't wait either. For Sundar, the world continued turning, full of board meetings, product launches, and quiet dinners with his family. And yet, beneath the surface of his well-ordered life, something had quietly shifted. His world was no longer defined only by timelines and technology. Somewhere within it now lived a boino, a man who had asked nothing of him, yet gave him everything in return. The silence they once shared had transformed into something sacred, a rhythm, an understanding. They didn't speak every day. They didn't need to. But when they did, it felt real, honest, like two people learning to speak a language they'd never been taught. But somehow already knew Arjun had completed his internship with distinction. No surprise there. He had led a team project that created a simple but powerful tool for under-resourced schools to teach coding to children. The same kind of schools where Mira had given her life. And when the time came to evaluate the project, Sundar didn't speak first. He let the team present. He let Arjun stand on his own. He wanted his son to be seen for who he was, not as the CEO's son, not as a charity case or a story in the shadows, but as himself. And Arjun shined. He didn't ask for credit. He deflected praise. But he stood tall. And after the presentation ended, as the room emptied, Sundar found himself sitting across from Arjun in the empty hall. Feeling something rise in his chest he hadn't fully named yet. Pride. Yes, but more than that, love. Not the love of obligation. Not the love you speak of because you must. But the quiet, unshakable kind that anchors you. The kind that says, I would cross any ocean to undo your pain. The kind that remains even when words fail. On a rainy evening in December, Sundar returned. Home late. He was tired. His wife was already asleep. The house was quiet, dim still. He poured himself tea, sat by the window, and listened to the rain. His phone buzzed. A message. Arjun, can we talk tomorrow? I want to show you something. Sundar smiled. Simple. No punctuation. But filled with weight. The next morning, they met at the same cafe. Rain still lingering in the air. Arjun was early. Sundar noticed he had a folder in his hand. What's this? Sundar asked as he sat. Arjun slid it across the table. I've decided. Sundar hesitated before opening it. Inside was a legal form. Name change request. From Arjun Singh to Arjun Singh Pichai. Sundar stared at the paper for a long time. He said nothing. He couldn't. Something had closed in his throat and his chest. Ached with emotion. I'm not doing it to honor you, Arjun said softly. I'm doing it because I want the truth to have a name. I want people to know who I am, where I come from, and maybe where I'm going. Sundar looked up, his voice thick. You sure? Arjun nodded. I've never been more sure of anything. A silence followed. A sacred one. Then Sundar reached across the table and placed his hand over the folder. Thank you, he said, barely above a whisper. Weeks later, Sundar was asked to give a keynote speech at a global conference in Singapore. The world was watching. Leaders from every industry were present. And his team had prepared everything, the perfect slides, the perfect phrases, the polished data points. But Sundar had something else on his mind. Halfway through the speech, he paused. He looked out at the audience, a sea of faces. And somewhere, sitting in the second row beside the engineering team, was Arjun. Quiet, Watching. Today, Sundar said, I want to speak about something beyond innovation. Something we rarely discuss in rooms like these. Something simple. The importance of being human. Asterisk, he looked down at his notes, then gently set them aside. For many years, I believed that success was about precision, performance, perfection. But recently, I was reminded that life is also made of the things we miss, the people we lose touch with, the letters that go undelivered, and the time we can never get back. The room was silent. I found out recently, he continued, that I had a son I never knew. For 24 years, he lived without me. And the truth is, he didn't need me. He became kind, brilliant, and strong without my presence. But he gave me something I never thought I'd have a second chance. And through him, I've discovered that some bonds, though broken for years, can still be rebuilt. His voice cracked. Just for a moment, asterisk. We talk so much about building technology that changes the world. But the greatest change starts with the people closest to us, with honesty, with humility, with the courage to say, I was wrong, but I'm here now. Hush fell over the audience. Not the stunned kind, but the reverent kind. The kind that comes when someone says something real. Asterisk.